What comes to mind of a modern person when he hears the name of the city of Chicago? Probably the eponymous musical, jazz, and Windy City. It is called so because of its location on the shores of Lake Michigan, from where an icy wind often blows, which the locals call a hawk. But that's not all the city has to offer. We all know that the birthplace of pizza is Italy, but there are some types of pizza that originated in other countries and cities. Chicago also has its own recipe. The Chicago-style Italian dish is a pizza with a fairly high edge, unusual for a classic model. Thanks to this feature, lovers of delicious food have had the opportunity to enjoy a bigger amount of cheese and tomato sauce. Also, Chicago pizzaiolos distinguished themselves by the way they cut traditional thin-crust pizza. Instead of cutting it into triangles, as is common everywhere, they began to cut it into squares and rectangles. Such a cut became known as four patties. Chicago is connected with Italy not only through pizza. It was in Chicago that Al Capone, a well-known gangster of Italian origin, operated in the 20th and 30s. During Prohibition and the Great Depression, he was at the head of the Chicago branch of the Italian Mafia. As a cover, he used a furniture business and dry cleaning, but in fact he was engaged in an underground trade of illegal drinks, gambling business, and other dirty affairs. On the other hand, he was involved in charity work by operating a chain of free canteens for the unemployed. Willis Tower is one of the city's most iconic landmarks. You can see four American states from the tower: Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Michigan. The building consists of 110 floors with a total height of 442 meters. Elevators of the building are one of the fastest in the world. It lays years when lifting. The height of the tower is 442 meters and the number of elevators is 352. The very first skyscraper in the world also appeared in Chicago, the Home Insurance Building, which was built in 1884-1885. The building consisted of 10 floors with a total height of 42 meters. Its architect, William LeBaron Jenney, became the first person to use the steel frame to support the walls and heavy weight of a building. Later, this technique was used as the Chicago skeleton. As often appears, the building was later demolished and a new skyscraper-filled building was built in its place. Due to the increase in the population density of urban areas, there was a growing need for high-rise buildings that would take up less space, or rather, they would take up the same amount of space but could accommodate more people. At that time, skyscrapers began to be used not only as offices but also as residential buildings. Skyscrapers aren't the only thing that residents of Chicago were first at. In 1937, the world's first blood bank opened in Chicago at the Cook County Hospital. After that, blood banks began to open around the world. Chicago is mistakenly credited as the birthplace of jazz. Well, actually, the musical genre appeared in New Orleans, but Chicago played a huge role in this matter, giving the world such a style of Chicago jazz, something between New Orleans jazz and swing. 1917 was the beginning of a period in the history of jazz when the best jazz performers of the New Orleans style began to appear in Chicago, among whom were King Oliver, Tom Brown, and Jelly Roll Morton. Since then, more and more jazz orchestras began to appear, and for the next 10 years, Chicago would remain the biggest center of jazz. Tourists arriving at a city for the first time tend to visit must-see sites. In the Windy City, among them are Millennium Park, Alfred Caldwell Lily Pool, and the magnificent Mile. Millennium Park is one of the most beautiful urban parks in the world. Its territory covers an area of 100,000 square meters. It was built as a symbol of the beginning of the new century and opened in 2004. The park quickly became popular and currently has more than 30 awards. There are several more attractions here at the territory of the park: Crown Fountain, an interactive object that is a video sculpture at the same time. It consists of two 15-meter towers composed of glass cubes depicting the inhabitants of Chicago. Every 5 minutes, when interactive citizens of Chicago begin to make faces, cold water flows from their mouths, splashing everyone nearby. Also, it's impossible to be in the park and not to pay attention to the Cloud Gate sculpture. It weighs 110 tons and is made of polished stainless steel plates. Locals call it the Bean. The park also has its own theater, the Harris Theater, which is the home of the Joffrey Ballet, as well as the Chicago Opera Theater. It often hosts dance performances by the Hubbard Street Dance Group as well as other world-class dance events. Mikhail Baryshnikov's ballet also performs here. There are also a lot of entertainment and interactive objects outside Millennium Park. Another Chicago park, Lincoln Park, has a lily pad pool, acknowledged as an American National Historic Landmark. At first, a pond appeared here in 1889 and was intended for growing tropical water lilies. Then in 1930, the park administration turned to landscape designer Alfred Caldwell. This is how typical plants of the American Midwest and flat rocks that are common for mountain canyons began to appear here. Pavilions with a cascade waterfall were built there as well. The Magnificent Mile, often referred to as the Mag Mile, is a downtown that stretches along Michigan Avenue located on both sides of Chicago River. The Magnificent Mile connects the Chicago Loop commercial area and the Gold Coast Historic District. It's widely considered as a rival of Fifth Avenue in New York and the Champs-Élysées in Paris. The Mag Mile is the most expansive and prestigious segment of Michigan Avenue, built up with skyscrapers and historic buildings. Luxury shops, boutiques and expensive restaurants are everywhere here. In total, there are about 460 shops and 275 restaurants. Another attraction of Chicago is the eponymous river, which flows in the opposite direction. It once flowed into Lake Michigan in the place where Madison Street is now located. In the 19th century, engineers changed the course of the river and directed it in a southward direction from Lake Michigan to the Mississippi River Basin. Such an undertaking was needed in order to protect buildings located on the river bank from possible floods. The river plays a big part in the celebration of St. Patrick's Day. For more than 50 years on the day, the river has been painted in green. And it's worth noting that according to one version, the tradition actually appeared by accident when a group of plumbers used fluorescent dye to track industries that were illegally disposing of substances polluting water. Another feature of the river is the number of drawbridges. There are 38 of them here. The first bridge across the river was built in 1832, the first drawbridge 2 years later. At the end of the 19th century, a tunnel was dug under the bridges in order to provide better bridge patency. The construction of such bridges was even described in Dreiser's novel, The Financier. By the way, those who definitely need to visit Chicago are Batman fans. Although the city of Gotham from the famous comic is fictional, there are some nuances. It was created as a prototype of New York, but on the basis of Chicago architecture. Well, that's it for Chicago. Don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe to this channel.